want to talk about a movie that has recently gripped my attention. I Am Legend with Will Smith. A friend of mine turned me on to this film a few weeks ago, and I've probably watched it 4 times or more in the last few weeks. Why has it caught my attention? Well, this is a tale, I think, that gives us an allegory for understanding what's going on in our world between the culture of life and the culture of death, how the culture of death is leading to the destruction of mankind, and most importantly, what Will Smith's character helps us to see is what we need to do in order to defeat the culture of death and build a culture of life. Now, let me give you some of the premise of the movie. The movie opens up with Dr. Alice Crippen. She's being interviewed on the nightly news, and she is announcing to the world that she has discovered the cure for cancer. Now, imagine what that would do if a doctor comes on the nightly news and announces, yes, I have discovered the cure for cancer. The world would rejoice, especially those suffering with cancer and the people who love those who are suffering with cancer. But what happens in the movie is what was hailed as this cure for cancer morphs into a virus that quickly, over the period of about 3 years, wipes out 90% of the human race. 1% was immune to this virus, and the other 9% morph into these, they call them dark seekers. They're these rabid, violent human animals that are starved and hunt down the remaining healthy 1% to eat them. So anybody alive is going to be eaten by these dark seekers. Will Smith's character is one of the 1% that is immune from the virus. He's also, just so happens to be, a virologist, a military virologist, who is devoting his life to discovering the cure for this virus so that he can save the human race from extinction. And what unfolds as this movie goes on is how this virus has taken hold, how it unfolded, how the human race got wiped out, but also, most importantly, how Will Smith ultimately discovers the cure. I'm not going to give too much away, and what he needs to do to bring that cure to the human race. Now, I think we can draw some important parallels here with the life of the church, with the life of the popes, and in particular Pope Paul VI. I see a kind of comparison between Dr. Robert Neville and Pope Paul VI. Why? Well, Pope Paul VI was famous for his encyclical Humanae Vitae, among other things. And this year, 2008, we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of the encyclical Humanae Vitae. Now, Paul VI is kind of like, drawing a comparison here in the movie, it would be kind of like somebody who said to Dr. Alice Crippen, no, I'm sorry, what you're saying here is a cure for the world's cancer is actually going to morph into a virus and wipe out the human population. Now, all those who were rejoicing in the cure for cancer, I don't think would go for this. Paul VI, in the midst of the sexual revolution, where the whole world is rejoicing in this whole idea of sexual freedom, intervenes and says, folks, what you're doing here is actually going to lead to destruction. And at the core of the sexual revolution of the 60s was, of course, the pill. Contraception as a way of separating sex from babies. Now, wise men and women throughout the 20th century, as contraception was being promoted, predicted that if contraception becomes the order of the day, it's going to be the beginning of the end of civilization as we know it. It was predicted not just by Catholics, not just by Christians, it was predicted by wise men and women around the world that if contraception became the order of the day, we would see an increase in adultery, an increase in premarital sex, an increase in out-of-wedlock births, an increase in sexually transmitted diseases, an increase in divorce, an increase in homosexuality. Did I say an increase in abortion? That as well. Basically, the sexual chaos and the culture of death in which we are living today was predicted, and it was said it will come through contraception. How so? How has contraception led to all these things? Now, clearly, it's much more complex than what I'm about to say here, but the logic, the inner logic, is unassailable. Think about it. Human beings are often tempted to do things we shouldn't do. We need deterrence to keep us from doing the things we shouldn't do. For example, what would happen to crime rates in a given society if jail terms were taken away. Take away the consequence, crime rates are going to skyrocket. Apply that same logic to sexual behavior. Throughout history, men and women have been tempted to commit adultery. It is nothing new. But what's been the main deterrent from committing adultery? Hasn't it been pregnancy? Take away that deterrent with contraception, what's going to happen to rates of adultery? Boom, they're going to skyrocket. And what's one of the main causes of divorce? Is it not adultery? Apply the very same logic to premarital sex, and you're going to see that rates of premarital sex are going to skyrocket. One of the main predictors of future marital breakdown is premarital sexual activity. It's like committing adultery in advance. You're demonstrating you don't understand, by engaging in premarital sex, you don't understand the gravity and importance, moral significance of the marriage commitment. That's going to have clearly a negative effect when you ultimately do get married. Now, it gets much worse. What's going to happen in a given society where there are huge increases in adultery, huge increases in premarital sex, and these men and women have already determined they don't want a child to result because they're using contraception? Well, we all know no method of contraception is 100% effective. What's going to happen? There are going to be a lot of so-called unwanted pregnancies. What's the temptation when there's an unwanted pregnancy? You're looking for a solution. You're looking for a way out. Guess what's going to come in next? Abortion. This has been proven in every society that has accepted contraception as a way of life. Abortion doesn't go down, abortion skyrockets. Why? Because the two are fruits of the same tree, as Pope John Paul II said. When you are engaging in contraceptive sex, you are already determining you don't want this to result in a child. The child comes anyway. Hey, I didn't want this, let's get rid of the baby. It gets much worse. Not everybody will abort their babies, thanks be to God. If you're pregnant and don't want to be, some will give their babies up for adoption. Praise God, it's a beautiful choice. But we know this is not going to be the majority. The majority of women who get pregnant and didn't want to be will end up raising the children themselves. This is not inherently wrong, but it is inherently problematic. Why? Because a culture of fatherless children is precisely the culture we live in today. It's a culture of drugs, of violence, of more promiscuity, of degradation of relationships, of pornography, of more and more abortion. It's something that spirals down and down, cycles into the culture of death we are living in today. What about homosexuality? What's the connection between contraception and the increase in homosexuality? Well, this isn't exactly table talk. This wouldn't be something you necessarily want to say in all company. But this is how a professor put it to me once, and it's kind of hits you right between the eyes the way he said it. Put it this way. He said, once you sever orgasm from procreation, any hole will do. Not a savory thought, but it is the logic that the whole homosexual community has latched onto to justify their own behavior. This is the societal chaos we are involved in today. And it was all brought on, directly or indirectly, by the once hailed miracle cure of the pill. That's the connection I see in watching the movie I Am Legend with Will Smith. So few people have even read Humanae Vitae. I would strongly urge you to Google it. Read exactly what Pope Paul VI said. He predicted the breakdown of morality. He predicted the breakdown of marriage. He predicted the lack of respect for women that is now going on in our pornographic culture. He predicted that governments would want to take control of the family and the sexual choices of procreation in the family. He predicted this. He predicted that it would lead to this idea that we have endless domination through scientific means to manipulate the human organism. Isn't that what's going on today with cloning and with all kinds of reproductive technologies? I Am Legend, in its own allegorical way, gives us a vision of where science gone wrong takes us. When we put our faith in science rather than our faith in God, in Jesus Christ, and in redemption, we can only expect eventually the destruction of man, not the salvation of man.